Good morning, everybody. My name is Lucia, and I'm your host today for the ADA celebration. We're going to give a few minutes to allow everybody to come into the room. Pay attention to the chat for some messages around interpretation. You're here today for the fourth week of the ADA celebration. You're in the right place. Thank you for being here. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. If anybody needs multi-pin, please let us know in the chat. All right, Joseph, it's slowing down in the waiting room. So we want to go ahead and kick it off. Now is a great time.
All right. Well, this is Joseph Lowe. I am the coordinator for the Oregon Disabilities Commission. And just wanted to start out thanking everyone for being here today, especially our panelists, taking time out of your schedule to share with us. So first off, we wanted to go over some housekeeping announcements. So Rose, can you throw those up there for us?
Si necesita interpretación en español, hay un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla con un globo terráqueo que dice Interpretación y se necesita escoger Spanish. Gracias.
All right. I think there was one right before this one, Rose, an access note or something like that.
Are you not seeing that? Give me just 1 second then.
No, it's on the virtual meeting etiquette one.
Oh, okay. Ah, gotcha. There we go.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So just to start off, access note is listen to your body. Feel free to move around, use the restroom, stretch, etc. Take a break as needed. Next slide. This is our virtual meeting etiquette. Check if your name and pronouns are correct. Mute your microphone if you're not speaking. State your name before speaking. Be present without distraction. Be respectful in the chat. It's not a place to argue, call out, or for any side conversation. Okay, so then next up, we have Jim Davis. He wants to speak with the crowd about the history of the ADA and what we are doing here today. Jim.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. I'm Jim Davis. I'm a former chair of the Oregon Disability Commission and have been an advocate for seniors and people with disabilities for 53 years now. And so it's great to see everyone. And I certainly want to welcome our stakeholders, particularly the advocates and the providers. You are the foundation of our efforts, and we appreciate you so very much. I want to thank Joseph Lowe, my friend for a couple of decades, and for the amazing work he does on these ADA celebrations. I've been involved with this for 15 years, the ADA celebration, and the work he's done has been a true highlight. And to Mark, the chair of ODC, and to our ODC commissioners, you do such amazing work. And of course, the ADA Center, we're so appreciative of the great education they're doing around the ADA, and then Disability Rights Oregon, who we love, who have done such amazing work and have been our protector and defender, and have had so many amazing legal decisions and other advocacy decisions for our community. So anyway, my role for many years has been to highlight essentially why we're here, and that is to celebrate the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is one of the greatest legislative achievements for people with disabilities, but certainly is one of the greatest civil rights legislation that we have ever seen. It was signed into law by President Bush Sr. on July 26, 1990. And so we're just a few days away from the birthday this year. What the ADA does is prohibits discrimination against people with disability. It's given people with disability the same opportunities to participate in mainstream activities that everybody else has, to enjoy those opportunities, career, business, family, recreation. They have a right in every way, as all the rest of us do, to access those wonderful parts of our lives. It deals with physical and emotional issues in healthcare, and that's really important to remember. Access to services that people with disabilities need, healthcare services, mental health services, addiction services. Those are issues certainly that many of us have been working on over the years. And access to those buildings that house those services, access to hospitals, to medical offices, things such as that. Equal access and removal of barriers is a very big a part of the ADA. Getting access to buildings, to public arenas, to services, to housing, so that you're never denied access to what you need or what you want to do with your family and your friends to enjoy life. You need access to those buildings, and particularly for workers with disabilities to be able to access their workplace. And of course, that whole issue of employment is one that I and many of you have been very, very involved with. And that is about no bias or no discrimination within the employment environment, and being able to have accommodations and access to do the work that so many people with disabilities are so skilled at. We need more people with disabilities who are employed and making the impact that they can make on society. And usually it's all about access and accommodations. It's also about access to transportation, to bus and train, but also to plane access to travel. And a lot of you travel overseas and travel around our country, and you need to have the access that is granted to you by rights of this act. But as travel expands, and this law becomes all the more important. We, of course, are talking about access to disability parking, and access to parking that's close enough to the building so that it really does make a difference. And many of you have service animals, and the coverage of those service animals is very, very important. And then the final area is really around communications. And of course, technology has advanced so far now. I mean, it's so different than when it was in 1990. But yeah, we're talking about telecommunications, computer, the internet, all the social media, to be able to have access to those areas of communication, particularly for the deaf and hard of hearing. But for everybody, those with sight difficulties, and we could name so many more. There's still a long ways to go before we end discrimination against people with disabilities, but we have made some tremendous strides since the ADA was finally formulated. Um, we will continue to fight, us disability advocates continue to fight for an end to bias and discrimination with people with disabilities. But this is a wonderful time for us to celebrate this wonderful piece of legislation. Thank you so much for having me here each time to talk about ADA. I very much appreciate all of you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Next up is the current chair for the Oregon Disabilities Commission, Mark King.
Hello. What ODC does is the ODC's mission is to secure economic, social, legal, and political justice for individuals with disabilities through systems change. To carry out this mission, the ODC identifies and hears the concerns of individuals with disabilities and uses the information to prioritize public policy issues which should be addressed, publicizes the needs and concerns of individuals with disabilities as they relate the full achievement of economic, social, legal, and political equality. Educate and advises the Department of Human Services, the governor, the legislative assembly, and appropriate state agencies, administration, and how public policy can be provided to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And so next up is our partners with Disability Rights Oregon. We have Melissa Roy Hart. I know her attendance was hit and miss today. So Melissa, are you with us?
This is Lucia. Melissa's not.
Okay. All right. Well, in her absence, she did type up a message to have me to read on her behalf if she was not able to be here. So this is what she wanted to share with everyone today. Thanks for joining us to celebrate the Americans with Disabilities Act. Disability Rights Oregon is a nonprofit that promotes and defends the rights of people with disabilities. We've been doing this work since 1977, when Congress chose us to be Oregon's official watchdog for disability rights. Here's what that means. We can go inside places like group homes, hospitals, jails, prisons, etc., to check on how people are being treated. If we find abuse or neglect, we take action, sometimes through lawsuits, sometimes by working directly with the people and places involved to fix the problem. We also help people one-on-one. If you have a legal problem related to your disability, we can point you in the right direction or connect you with resources. We produce free, easy-to-understand guides about your rights and run trainings to help people learn how to fight for their own rights. Beyond individual help, we work on bigger systemic issues too, pushing for changes that make life better for as many people as possible. And she wanted to say that she is glad everyone is here today. Next up is our partner from the Northwest ADA Center, Katie.
Thank you, Joseph. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie Warden, and I'm the director of the Northwest ADA Center. We're the Regional Americans with Disabilities Act Center for the state of Oregon. And so we really just exist to answer questions and teach about this law. And so if you ever have questions about your rights as a disabled person, maybe about your rights to an accommodation at work, your right to bring a service animal with you in most areas that are open to the public, right? Call us and we can help explain how those rights apply in different situations. And as we get into the topic of digital accessibility, the presentation today, I also want to let you know you can reach out to us if you have questions about the new rule. We're here to help answer those questions. We might not be able to answer all of them, but we'll be able to connect you with people who are experts in digital accessibility. I also wanted to say thank you everyone for being here. We've been celebrating the ADA anniversary all month. And as it gets to the end of this month, I am so grateful for this law, as imperfect as we all know it is. And one of the things that I really love about the ADA is that it does make it easier for all of us to be here together with our different access needs, with our different disabilities in community. And not a perfect law, but thank you to the ADA. Whew. I'm really looking forward to this presentation. So, right, even when it feels like disability rights might be under attack, we are still moving forward. Access is being spread to new areas of our society, and that's kind of so exciting. So, thank you, everyone. I'm really looking forward to our talk today.
All right, thank you, Katie. Also, as you heard Jim mention, that the anniversary date is actually July 26th. That was 2 days ago. And so, Rose, can you pop up the governor's proclamation for everyone?
I apologize. I didn't get that up. Give me just a moment and I will do so. Okay. Nope, that didn't work. Try that again.
If you can't get it, Rose, I can just read it for everybody real quick.
Got
Okay,
it.
go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I've got it. There we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe just make a little bigger. There we go. So on your screen now is the proclamation from the governor's office. So I will just kind of read that real fast for you. We also will have this posted on the events website. So it says the State of Oregon Proclamation Office of the Governor, whereas President George H.W. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act on July 26, 1990, to ensure the civil rights of people with disabilities. And whereas the ADA established a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And whereas the ADA has expanded opportunities for Americans with disabilities by reducing barriers, changing perceptions, and increasing full participation in community life. And whereas Oregonians and the nation will recognize the progress that has been made by celebrating the 36th anniversary of the signing of the ADA on July 26, 2026. Now, therefore, I, Tina Kotek, Governor of the State of Oregon, hereby proclaim July 26, 2026 to be the 36th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act in Oregon and encourage all Oregonians to join in this observance. In witness of, I hear, excuse me, voice kind of cracked there. In witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause the great seal of the State of Oregon to be affixed. Oops, my screen moved a minute. Done at the Capitol in the city of Salem in the state of Oregon on this day, June 22nd, 2026. And then you have the state seal and her signature on it. And like I said, we will post that to the website so that everyone can view it or grab a copy of it if you would like it for your records. So that will be on there. All right. Next up is just a brief introduction of, excuse me, voice is cracking all of a sudden. Brief introduction of our panelists for today. So, Rose, can you throw that up there for us?
I apologize. I also didn't get that up. I must have missed the memo. Give me a moment.
Whoops.
I pulled up about half of the things I needed. So, all right, let's go back here. Share. There we go. Share. Okay, are we seeing the lovely pictures of the folks
Yeah.
who have presented? All right.
Yeah.
For our other presenters, and today we have, starting with these folks.
Yeah, so today we have Caitlin Spadell. She is the ADA Information Specialist and a Certified ADA Coordinator from Northwest ADA Center. We also have Julian De Los Prados, I hope I said that right, co-founder of Accessibilities. And then we also have Marissa Hurt. He is the Inclusive Marketing and Digital Accessibility Specialist from Accessibilities as well. So thank y'all panelists for being here. And Katie, I will turn it over to you to let you get started. I mean, not Katie, Caitlin, I mean, goodness gracious. My mind is going 500 miles a minute, I think.
That's okay, Joseph. Thank you so much. All right, I believe I'm screen sharing now. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Again, my name is Caitlin Spidell. I am the ADA Information Specialist at the Northwest ADA Center, and I have been with the Northwest ADA Center for just over 3 years now, and also have my certification as an ADA coordinator. I do want to just disclose today that I am still recovering from a cold, so I may stop intermittently for water or mute briefly to clear my throat. So hopefully this won't be too much of a distraction. But for today's session, I'll start by talking about the ADA and the Department of Justice's ruling on digital accessibility. Okay, so many of you may already be familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act, especially if you've attended some of these other webinars in this celebration series. But for those of you who are newer to the topic, I'll just provide a brief overview of the ADA and its structure over the next couple slides. So the ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities and ensures equal rights and access to opportunities in most areas of public life. This might seem like a simple concept, but it's really important to keep this in mind, that the ADA is a civil rights law and not a benefits law, right? It's intended to provide equal opportunity and basic access. It's about removing barriers and providing opportunities for people with disabilities to access the same goods, services, programs, and activities that are available to everyone else. The ADA does not provide people with disabilities with monetary benefits or special privileges. There may be some other federal or state laws that provide people with those types of services, but that's not part of the ADA. On this slide, I've included an aerial view of a soccer field. In Seattle, we recently had FIFA and some exciting soccer events here, so I thought this image was fitting. I like to use the soccer field as a visual reminder that the ADA is about getting everyone on the same playing field. All right, so the ADA is organized in sections called titles. Each title applies to a different area of public life and establishes rights and responsibilities in that setting. So as Jim was stating earlier, Title I covers employment, Title II covers state and local government programs, services, and activities. Title III applies to public accommodations, which includes many businesses and nonprofit organizations. Title IV addresses telecommunications, and Title V contains a variety of additional provisions related to the ADA. For today's presentation, we'll primarily be focused on Title II because the Department of Justice's web accessibility rule applies to state and local governments. Often these are referred to as public entities or public agencies, and I might use those terms interchangeably throughout today's session. And when we say public entity, we're talking about a wide range of government operated or government funded services and programs. So this might include public schools and universities, public hospitals and health clinics, public transit agencies, libraries, courts, parks and recreation programs, emergency services, and many other state and local government functions. Now, before we dive into the rule itself, I think it's helpful to understand where this rule comes from. The ADA was enacted in 1990, and at its core, the ADA requires equal access to programs, services, and opportunities for people with disabilities. And when most people think about the ADA, they often think about physical accessibility, right? Things like ramps, accessible parking, elevators, entrances. And one reason for that is timing, right? The ADA was signed into law in 1990, and the World Wide Web didn't become publicly available until a few years later in 1993. As a result, the ADA doesn't specifically mention websites or mobile apps or other digital services, but that doesn't mean that digital accessibility falls outside of the ADA. The Department of Justice, which is responsible for enforcing Title II of the ADA, has consistently taken the position that state and local government websites are covered by the ADA, and we can see that position reflected over time. So in 2003, the DOJ had released technical assistance specifically addressing website accessibility for public entities. And then in 2010, during the rulemaking process, the Department of Justice stated, quote, "There is no doubt that websites of state and local government entities are covered by Title II of the ADA," end quote. And finally, in 2024, the Department of Justice issued its final rule on digital accessibility and web content and mobile applications for state and local governments. Right, and this rule establishes a clear technical standard and compliance timelines for digital accessibility. The point I want to emphasize,
what is going on? It's just
the point I want to emphasize is that this rule doesn't create brand new obligations. Public entities have long been expected to provide accessible digital services, but what this 2024 rule does is provide greater clarity on what accessibility means and how compliance will be measured. So we just discussed the idea of kind of state and local government websites should be accessible, right? That's not new. Now, what is new is that the DOJ has established a specific accessibility standard for compliance timelines for public entities, right? And this rule addresses a long-standing challenge. While public entities have had obligations to provide accessible digital services, there wasn't a single clearly defined technical standard written into the ADA itself. And in many ways, this rule is similar to what the Department of Justice did for physical accessibility when it adopted the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design. Right, those 2010 ADA standards provided a benchmark for accessibility in the built environment, and this rule provides a benchmark for accessibility in digital environments.
Excuse me, this is the AS Interpreter. I have to ask you to slow down, please.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I can't keep up.
So the rule applies to web content and mobile applications provided by Title II entities. That could include agency websites, payment portals, transit apps, online forms, reservation systems, and many other digital services that the members of the public rely on. The technical standards identified in the rule is WCAG 2.1 level AA, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. WCAG is an internationally recognized set of accessibility standards developed to help ensure that websites and mobile applications are usable by people with a wide range of disabilities. If you download these slides later, I've included a link to the WCAG website where you can explore those standards in more detail. Okay, so we just discussed the idea that state and local government oh wait, sorry, I just didn't move my slide. All right. So one question that I hear frequently is whether there are any exceptions to this rule. And the answer is yes, but they are fairly limited. So the DOJ identifies kind of 5 categories of content that might be exempt from requirements to comply with WCAG 2.1. The first exception is archived web content. An example might be a historical report from 1980 that is maintained in an archive section of the website. Now, the DOJ provides specific criteria for when content qualifies as archived. So I encourage you to review the rule or visit the DOJ's fact sheet and frequently asked questions for those details. The second exception is for certain pre-existing conventional electronic documents, such as older PDFs that were created before the compliance date. The third exception is content posted by a third party when that content is not provided through a contract, a license, or an other arrangement with the public entity. An example of this might be comments submitted by members of the public on a message board that might fall within this exception. The fourth exception is for individualized password protected documents, such as a utility bill, a tax statement, or a similar document provided to a specific individual through a secure portal. And finally, the fifth exception is for social media posts that were published before the compliance deadlines. Now, the key important takeaway is that these exceptions are relatively narrow, right? If an exception doesn't apply, the expectation is that web content and mobile applications will conform with these WCAG 2.1 level AA requirements. I also want to highlight that these exceptions do not eliminate a public entity's broader ADA obligations. Public entities must still provide effective communication and make reasonable modifications when appropriate. For example, even if an archived video qualifies for one of these exceptions, a public entity may still need to provide an accessible version or another effective means of communication if requested by a person with a disability. All right, so at this point, I've talked quite a bit about Title II entities, but I just want to take a moment to be very clear about who this rule applies to. This rule applies to state and local governments, programs, services, and activities that they provide to the public. This includes public entities such as city and county governments, public transit agencies, public schools and universities, public libraries, and many other public agencies. It also applies to contractors when they are providing web content and mobile applications or other digital services on behalf of a public entity, right? The idea is that public entities can't avoid their accessibility obligations simply by outsourcing a service to a third-party vendor. One question that comes up is whether this rule applies to private businesses and nonprofit organizations. And the answer is no. This rule specifically applies to Title II entities. However, that doesn't mean that private businesses and nonprofits are exempt from accessibility obligations, right? Title III of the ADA still requires covered entities to provide equal access to their goods and services, and digital accessibility has been subject of litigation, settlement agreements, and enforcement activity over the past years. Okay, so now we've talked about who the rule applies to. Let's talk about when compliance is required. Some of you may already know that the compliance dates for the DOJ Title II rule were recently extended by a year. So the deadlines are based on population size. Public entities serving a population of 50,000 or more must comply by April 26, 2027. And then public entities serving a population under 50,000 must comply by April 26, 2028. While many organizations may welcome the additional time, I encourage you not to view this as a reason to pause accessibility efforts. Building and maintaining accessible digital content takes time, right? And these dates are going to arrive sooner than you think. So continue making progress where you can, right? Conduct accessibility reviews, address the known barriers, improve your procurement practices, and build accessibility into everyday workflows. Demonstrating kind of that ongoing good faith effort towards accessibility is important, and this extra year provides an opportunity to make meaningful improvements rather than delay the work. Okay, I'll end my portion of today's presentation just talking briefly about why digital accessibility matters. I think most of us would agree that society has become increasingly reliant on online spaces. Many of the interactions that once required an in-person visit, phone call, or paper form now happen online, right? People use websites and mobile applications to pay bills, to complete their transactions, to access public information, to request accommodations, to request programs, or participate in civic life. And for many public entities, digital services have become one of the primary ways that people interact with government programs and services. As a result, digital access has become a real integral part of accessing public services, programs, and activities, right? If a website or online form isn't accessible, that can create a barrier for people with disabilities and limit their ability to participate fully. So at its core, that's why digital accessibility matters, right? The ADA is about ensuring equal access and opportunity. And in today's world, that increasingly includes access to digital spaces. Fortunately, there are some well-established tools and standards and practices that can help make websites and mobile applications more accessible. As Katie had mentioned earlier, if you have questions about the ADA in general or how the ADA applies to digital accessibility, please contact us. I've included our contact information on this slide. Our phone number is 1-800-949-4232, or email questions to us at nwadaCTR@uw.edu. I will work on getting that information in the chat, but with that, I will hand things over to Julian, who will take a deeper dive into what digital accessibility looks like in practice.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Caitlin. What a great talk. So Caitlin spoke, and let me get my slides up before I begin. Okay. So, hi, everyone. My name is Julian de los Prados. I am co-founder of Accessibilities. We are accessibility inspectors. So this is what we do day in and day out. And I'm joined by my colleague today, Marissa Hurt. Caitlin just walked you through what the DOJ rule requires. And Marissa and I are going to spend our time on what digital accessibility looks like in practice. And in particular, there is one shortcut that I want to warn you about. And our title for today, for this presentation, is that overlays fail the communities they serve. You might have encountered a accessibility overlay in the past. It's that little accessibility button, usually using the universal access icon in the corner of a website. You can click on it and accessibility settings become available to you as a user. And so over the next few minutes, I'm going to explain what it does, what it doesn't do, and why that matters, especially in light of the DOJ deadline. Moving on to our next slide. So on screen are two photos, one of me and another of my colleague, Marissa. As I mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Accessibilities. And Marissa, if you'd like to please introduce yourself for us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julian. Sorry, my screen reader is reading everything on the comment screen too, so it's a lot. Okay, so my name is Marissa Hurt. I've been visually impaired my entire life, with my blindness kind of taking over with the past 3 years. And prior to becoming blind, I had a career in digital marketing. And through extensive rehabilitation and training with the Braille Institute, I learned everything I needed to with assistive technology. And I now aim to kind of blend my professional experience with my lived experience. And I specialize in digital marketing inclusive marketing and digital accessibility, where I work with Julian and his co-founder, Adam, at Accessibilities. And aside from that, I am the president of the Orange County chapter of Foundation Fighting Blindness. And I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Marissa. Marissa and we work with organizations across the country who are striving to meet web accessibility standards for their website. This includes public agencies, municipalities, airports, schools, and businesses. As I mentioned, we are inspectors, and we use the WCAG 2.1 guidelines. These are the same guidelines that Caitlin described, and the ones that the DOJ is holding as the standard for website accessibility. So before we get into overlays, I just want to acknowledge the position that a lot of Title II organizations are in. On screen, I've listed 3 pressures that organizations of all sizes are facing. The first one is tight budgets. So rarely does accessibility have its own line item in a budget. That is increasingly improving over time, but we are still a long ways to go from that. Second, there is generally thin staffing. So most public entities, most organizations don't have an ADA coordinator or any sort of specialist on payroll. Third, there's this real deadline looming, as Caitlin covered, April 2027 for larger entities and April 2028 for smaller ones. So the picture for a lot of you is, or a lot of these organizations, is limited budget, no in-house expert, and a legal deadline incoming. What this means is that when a vendor emails an organization and promises instant automated compliance, it is an incredibly tempting offer. And unfortunately, that is the situation that the overlay industry has been built around. And that's why we want to talk honestly about what they deliver and what they don't. I'm going to hand it over to Marissa, who will speak a little bit about what overlays miss in everyday use and her own experience.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that while these overlays might seem like a good fix to address a lot of accessibility needs, for myself, as someone who is nearly completely blind, for those of you who aren't familiar with how someone like myself navigates digital products and websites, it's entirely through using a keyboard. I'm not even touching the mouse, and it's narrated, it's audio. Essentially, it's reading every single thing on the screen, hence the word screen reader. That's the assistive tech that I use. It's important to note, too, that blindness is a spectrum. So when I had some vision, something that is important as well are things like high contrast and legible font size and being able to zoom in without compromising the content. And additionally, too, for someone who might be blind, deaf-blind, having the ability to navigate a website with their braille display and it making sense. And things like overlays might cause a lot of conflicts between that assistive tech and then the fix that they're trying to put over that website. And for someone like me, it's a crucial barrier for me to understand what's going on. And these government entities, such as like traveling and transportation, I need to plan ahead, as many of us who have disabilities need to plan ahead in order to have a successful trip out. It's imperative that these accessibility tools and compliance are efficient.
Thank you so much, Marissa. So how does an overlay work under the hood? We're going to get a little more into the detail here. So overlays are packaged usually as a plugin that you purchase for your website. You subscribe, you install the widget, and it then loads the vendor software onto your website. So once installed, it starts to do things to the page on page load, and it does 2 things. So we'll go over those. So the first is that it tries to in the browser. So it does an automated scan of your page, and then it applies fixes using code, and nowadays it's using AI as well. So it'll do things like it'll add missing labels to the code. Those are what the screen reader relies on to be able to navigate a user through the page. It'll label a button or a menu. And as I mentioned, nowadays it's using AI to generate alternative text for images. So the issue with this, and I'm just going to check the chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. Looks like we're doing good. The second thing, I'm sorry, the issue with the automated scan is that there's no human in the loop. And even more importantly, there's no impartial third-party human. So there's no one verifying that the fixes are compliant against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that is the standard. And guess what? Many times those fixes are not compliant, at least in our experience. The second thing an overlay does once it's installed on your website, it injects this floating widget in the corner. It usually uses the universal access icon, as I mentioned. And when you click on it, you'll get features like high contrast, larger font. And on the screen, I'm showing a mock-up of what one of these icons would look like on a sample web page. And so I want to be fair that for some users, these preferences can be helpful. But as a lot of you know, nowadays, your browser and your phone do a lot of these, right? Zooming, turning on a reader mode, text size, high contrast. So these are much more available to the average user today as opposed to 5-10 years ago. And lastly, if you're a person that is relying on screen readers or other pieces of assistive technology, you're not going to be using this widget. You're going to be coming in with your own tools. You're going to bring your own setup to the table. And so that is what the second part of the overlay provides. So there's two main offerings that they advertise. Okay. And these cause three main issues for people that use assistive technology. And rather than describe them myself, Marissa, if you could please help us to understand. Yes.
So essentially what this causes is as Julian mentioned, most of us are using our own assistive technology. For example, myself using a screen reader. When an overlay is enacted on a website, it can conflict with the assistive technology, causing a lot of confusion for me as the user. It might narrate doubly or confusing information throughout the web page itself. Secondly, it can also trap the user. So as I mentioned, I'm using just my keyboard, and one of the ways that I am navigating a website is clicking the tab button to go to each element of the page. And with the overlay, what can happen is I can get trapped in one of those elements, and then I'm unable to navigate any further throughout the page, making it's impossible to even understand what's going on the web page itself. And then lastly, it's the labeling of some of these elements too, whether that's alt text or links. They're not properly labeled. So while I'm trusting that it's giving me the right information, and it narrates it with such confidence that it could be an image of something completely different that it's narrating. And then also a link may not even be a link. So those are the top three conflicts that happen.
Thanks, Marissa. On the next slide, we have a quote from the National Federation of the Blind. Marissa, I'll read it out for the audience here. We demand that overlay providers stop making misleading, unproven, and unethical claims which falsely inflate the value and effectiveness of their technology. This was from a 2021 resolution on accessibility overlays, and that was the last resolution from the National Federation of the Blind on this technology.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with NFB, or National Federation of the Blind, it's the largest organization of blind and low vision individuals. And I think aside from that, there's over 1,000 accessibility specialists and other people with disabilities that echo this same sentiment. It's just falsely marketed as the be all fix for everything accessibility when it's not.
Yep. Yeah, I'll keep my editorializing out of it, but I have my own opinions. A scan is okay. So this next slide is about what a scan can do and what it can't. So how good is it at automation, at catching these accessibility problems? Uh, they so to be fair, they are somewhat effective. So just not fully effective. An automated scan reliably tests about 16 of the 50 WCAG 2.1 success criteria. So that's roughly 30%. WCAG, as Caitlin mentioned, is the International Rulebook for Accessible Websites. And so what it reliably catches, as you can imagine, coming from a computer program, it catches the mechanical stuff. So stuff like, is a text description missing from an image? Is the color contrast sufficient? Is a form field have a label? But what it doesn't catch is the most important stuff. And Marissa, if you could speak to the types of barriers that still need a real person in order to make a judgment call.
Absolutely. And these are some of the just a few of the things that I help accessibilities kind of audit on some of the websites that are brought forth for me to expect. One of which is alt text. And I did hear someone comment about best practices for alt text, so I'd be happy to answer at the end. But alt text is essentially images on the web page that someone like myself am not able to see. And sometimes they're not appropriately labeled or very minimally described. And if it's something that's going to help me understand what the content is, it needs to be descriptive. And that's something that is oftentimes missed. And then secondly are the heading hierarchies. So when I'm navigating a web page, it will usually say heading 1, heading 2. And as you can imagine, it's giving me each heading of the web page. If they're not in the right order, of course, the content of the page is not going to make sense to me. And I am going to have extreme difficulty getting to the location of that website that I need to get to. And that's something that I see oftentimes when I'm inspecting is being able to understand a page and making sure those headings are in the right order. And lastly, it is, appropriately labeling error message. So if something were to pop up on the screen for an error, is it giving or is it narrating that error message to me? If not, I'm stuck in that error. I have no way to navigate outside of that error or troubleshoot what's going on. So it essentially, again, creates a huge barrier for me as a user.
Yeah, so an automated scan can detect whether an alt text is missing, whether it's there or not. But would you say that an alt text, the automated scan will not tell you if that alt text is actually meaningful or actually is representative of the picture?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it needs to have that rich information for me to understand what is actually portrayed in that image.
That's why you need a human in the loop. And not just any human, you need Marissa. No.
Thank you.
So we want to talk a little bit, I want to talk a little bit more about the kind of things that these overlays are advertising. And so what is the promise that they're selling? And I want to just boil it down to what did regulators have to say when they weighed in. So in early 2025, the Federal Trade Commission reached a settlement with Accessibility, one of the largest overlay vendors. The company settled and did not admit wrongdoing, just for full transparency there. But that said, here are the parts of what the FTC alleged that are relevant to our talk today. One, the compliance claims didn't hold up. So the FTC called the claims false, misleading, or unsubstantiated. So the claims that an overlay make your website accessible were not true. Two, the product fell short on some of the very basic WCAG requirements. As we mentioned, stuff like navigating menus, proper image descriptions, even having a proper form field. They struggle with them. So, I don't bring all this up as a means to pile on a vendor, But this is indicative of almost every vendor for accessibility overlays that we see. It's just simply not a defensible accessibility strategy by itself. Okay, as I mentioned, there are some virtues to it, but it needs to be layered. And so on this next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about how accessibility actually gets tested day to day. So on screen, I have a pyramid, and you can think of testing like a pyramid with 4 layers. So if we're not relying on accessibility widgets for conformance with WCAG, what are we using? So automated scans make up that bottom layer. So as we discussed, they catch about 30% of the WCAG standards. They're cheap, they're fast, but they're shallow. Okay. Moving on up, the next layer of the pyramid, that's where we start to introduce manual expert review. So this is a person actually reading the website code or looking through the page structure and applying WCAG logic and judgment to assess accessibility. Above that, we have the same sort of testing, but now incorporating assistive technology. So that manual expert review, they're now using assistive technology to test. So they're actually using a screen reader. They're using their keyboard. They're using magnification to give them a more realistic view of what the barriers are. At the very top, and this is the layer that we see almost everyone skipping, it's that you need to be testing with users who actually rely on that technology every day. So real people doing real tasks, people like Marissa, people that actually are going to find the issues that a user who relies on assistive technology are going to run into. A manual expert review, many inspectors are cited. There are some inspectors who are not cited or don't have disabilities. So there's a big variance in who is actually doing the manual review. So stacked together, this is how you would find what a scan wouldn't. Okay. So this next slide is what the DOJ rule signals. So let's connect this back to what Caitlin walked us through. So there's 3 signals on screen. The first bar is WCAG 2.1 level AA. And your site's content has to meet that standard. And it's not a script laid over on top of it, like an overlay. The actual code needs to be fixed and made accessible. Second, there's no overlay safe harbor. Nowhere in the rule does it say that installing a widget counts as conformance, and DOJ guidance specifically says not to rely on overlays alone. You have to be using all layers of the testing pyramid. Third, and most importantly, real access is the real test. So even a technically conforming site still owes people effective communication and a way to submit accessibility requests. So Caitlin described this as well. These are all part of digital accessibility. So it goes way past conformance with WCAG. It's really how are you treating people? And so finally, I'd like to reframe the goal for us and for anyone watching. People in the accessibility world will remind you that this isn't a project that you finish and you put to rest. Real accessibility compliance is a practice. You have to maintain it, especially in the digital world where websites might change every week or every month. And so what we suggest is an ongoing manual review schedule. Find a tester that you work well with, that uses assistive technology for testing, that uses screen readers, that uses keyboards without a mouse, the way that people who rely on assistive technology actually navigate your site. And a responsive intake process for accessibility requests is so crucial. So establish an easy way for someone to report a barrier and to reach a human who can resolve it. And by the way, that is what the DOJ rule expects as well. And lastly, the one thing this audience knows best, keep people with disabilities involved throughout the process and as early on in the process as possible. So where do you start leaving this talk today? One, I encourage everyone to try one core task with a screen reader if you haven't already, or if you're not familiar with a screen reader. Try using one. Try using just your keyboard to navigate your website. Pick your single most used service, put the mouse away, try to complete it, and guarantee you'll learn more in 10 minutes than any report will tell you. Two, start on the most high priority fixes. So start on your homepage. That's where you know most people are going to land. Start on those pages where people can make service requests, where their forms are. That's where your fixes to your website are going to have the most effect immediately. It's a large task to remediate a website. It takes a while. Like it's a project. So you got to start where the traffic is, where you know people are most being affected. Three, give people a real way to report a barrier. Mentioned this a few times. It is vital, and you put it right there on your where you have your accessibility policy on your web page. Give everyone everything they need to interact with your business and your website. And lastly, and this is what I'd love you to walk away with, do not rely on widgets and add-ons alone for your website. If your user likes the preference menu, maybe you can keep it, but make sure that the widget you install is not detracting from accessibility rather than enhancing it. Thank you so much on behalf of me and Marissa. I'll just close by bringing us back to why we're all here, the celebration of the ADA, and in the words of the Disability Rights Oregon's own executive director, it reflects rights that were fought for, not handed down. So thank you so much. And this is the new frontier, digital accessibility.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all.
All right. Well, thank y'all for that presentation. Now we definitely do have some time left over. So if folks that are attending today would like to ask questions of the panel, you can signify by raising your virtual hand. It's the little React tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can, type the question in the chat if you don't want to talk. And we can read it off for you, that kind of stuff. The first question I see is from Rosna.
Thank you. So I'm a trainer with the Oregon Department of Human Services with the Learning and Development Unit in HR. And one of the things that we're looking at is having to make sure that all of our materials are accessible and compatible for screen readers and such. And it's an enormous body of work, of course, as everyone can appreciate. And Marissa, thank you so much for all of the things that you have been stating. I would really want to just ask very specifically, what is the best size of font size that we need for specific things like documents? So is it 14-point minimum? Is it 12-point minimum? What is the spacing supposed to be for any kind of documents? And then, of course, I did mention in the chat for alt text, do you want it to be really one sentence, short sentences, or details in the alt text? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to take that one. Thank you, Rashna. First of all, for body size font text, it's usually around 16 point font. However, I would also, and you mentioned PDFs, and PDFs are probably the most commonly present document on a website, and it's the one that gets passed around the most. I would say font size is a great place to start, but also you want to be looking at other factors as well. So yes, 16 font size is good, but use some sort of checker just to give you a baseline. As I said, automated scans are only going to get you 30% of the way there, but using a checker will kind of point out some issues that you might just not be thinking of. But that's for font size, yeah. And that's for body. There's going to be different recommendations for heading size.
Yeah, and for spacing and things like that. And the same as for PowerPoints. Like if we were to give PowerPoints, are there any specific recommendations on that?
Yeah. PowerPoints can be a little more difficult. And what we see often is that organizations will export their PowerPoint as a PDF and then share it that way. I would say PDFs, it really depends on person to person, but I think PDFs are easier to work with regards to making them more accessible. But also, it depends on who your audience is. And the presentation, I guess. So are you sending these out after a meeting? Is this something that you're presenting live? When you're presenting live, there's different things to think about. I hope that answers your question. I can get you more guidance afterwards.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So I see John's hand, but I wanted to do a couple of questions from the chat real fast, and then we'll let you go, John. The first one in the chat is from Angie. It says, does accessibility access also include English as the second language? This has been on her mind concerning signage.
That is a very good question, and I don't know the actual guidance for that. More focused on digital with regards to the languages. I don't know if Caitlin, you have any response there.
Sorry, giving myself a second to think about this question. Let me do a little bit of online research. I'm also in my mind thinking about digital spaces, but
Yeah, and if you could maybe give us a little more context for the question. So what is the space that you're referring to? Or how is the document being presented or the signage?
All right, we'll do another question from the chat and then we'll bounce over to John. This one is from Kim. It says, thank you for the presentation. Are there accessibility overlays that are better than others? These were presented to us as industry standards and they do more for other disabilities. So how would you recommend we navigate that?
Yeah, unfortunately, at this point in time, I cannot recommend any overlays because unfortunately, it provides most of the time what I see is that it provides a false sense of security for the organization. They think, okay, we installed an overlay, we're good. They don't follow up with manual testing. They don't follow up with inspections to actually make sure that the guidance is being followed. At the end of the day, it's not the thing you're going to be evaluated against is the WCAG guidelines. And so, those guidelines they don't care what sort of technology or process you're using. It's does it conform or does it not? And just one thing, I did mention checkers. Checkers are it's those automated scans that I spoke about, right? So you can use them as a recon tool to give you like an idea of what you're missing, but do not rely on checkers. You really need to be partnering with an actual manual inspector. And John, question from John.
Sure. My name is John Romano, Disaster Central Executive Director, and we're working on in the area of assistive technology and technologies and developing mobile apps that facilitate emergency response.
Mm.
And, as a small nonprofit, we we built an MVP, which is called a minimum viable product that is compliant. But we found, we're working with independent living centers and state centers for independent living that we really need to do pilot projects to advance the technology, incorporate features sets such as AI, and we found the best way to do that would be to launch some pilot projects. Question is simply this: is there anybody you can recommend out there in advancing a pilot project of this nature? Again, with the notion of closing emergency response gaps for people with disabilities and access and functional needs. We're very interested in talking and collaborating through an MOU of some form or fashion and advancing, our minimum viable product, which could advance commercial activity in this area.
Yeah. As far as, I'll tell you right now, I would love to help you, but as far as recommending specific partners, it's very difficult because every organization has their own needs, their own requirements, and their own guidelines and frameworks, legal and otherwise. So it's very difficult. You have to find a partner that works with you. I always recommend finding a partner that is going to work with your current team. Some, outside inspectors you bring in, they will say, okay, we will fix this for you, but we can only do it ourselves, or, you have to pay us to fix it. Find a team that's going to give you an inspection report. So you have an itemized list of all your barriers, and then you can take that wherever it works best for you. So you can bring that to your internal team. You can bring that to your other stakeholders, and that's how you start to build a budget for accessibility within the project. Even at this early stage, it's really important because at this stage is when it's easiest to start incorporating accessibility. If you wait till later on down the road and try to bolt it on, it's going to be more costly and it's going to be more difficult. I hope that answers your question. Did that help a little bit?
Yes, it did. I think, one of the things, one approach strategically we're looking at is building out as a tool that could be jointly used between caretakers and people with disabilities, the end users.
If that is the case, I would say my number one recommendation is to get the MVP in front of users, people that use assistive technology, people with disabilities, so that you can actually get their feedback and their take on how it's working for them. Mm-hmm. And for that said, take caretakers as well. Everyone, all the final users of the program should be getting their hands on it as early as possible to give you feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to talk more about that with you, John.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another question from the chat is from Carol. It says, does this include systems where it's kind of set up like an online application system? So people applying for benefits, maybe an online application system for jobs, that type of stuff.
Yeah, as the question is, do these guidelines apply for those sort of systems? Let me see. I'm looking at the text here.
I think that's what it's meaning. It just says, does this include the systems?
Okay. I will just say any digital system that is open to the public or to employees, to anyone, needs to be following this. If you're asking specifically about the DOJ rule, the ADA outlines 3 titles: Title 1, Title 2, Title 3. And so it depends on the use case of the software and the organization. But broadly, it applies to everyone.
All right. Next question I see is from Leanne. It says, should departments and organizations conduct regular audits of their systems for digital accessibility? And if so, is there a system, a checklist, compatibility, or surveys that can be used?
If the question is, do they? The answer is they should. And what should they use? It's the WCAG 2.1 guidelines. Those are the standard. That's what you want to be looking at. With regards to inspecting, like the actual skill involved in doing an inspection, it's not easy, right? Inspectors, this is their profession. They take pride in the skill it takes to interpret what the guidelines are saying and how that applies to what they're really seeing. So there's a little bit of an art to it, and that's why, just like you might find with CASP or just physical inspectors, every inspector is different with regard to their approach and what they value and um, the amount of work they're willing to put in. So
Yeah, this is Caitlin. I think all I have to add here is that I'm not aware of kind of a nice, simple checklist for digital accessibility yet. But maybe that's something that we'll see come out of this DOJ ruling in the next few years. So keep an eye out for those resources for sure.
yeah, and there is some guidance on the DOJ website. And there are a lot of organizations around digital accessibility, so you can find a checklist online. I just don't know if there's one that Caitlin and I will say this is the definitive one, right? It's kind of a holistic approach. Yeah, as Jen mentioned in chat, there's a bunch of free checklists. Just, don't rely on one. Maybe use three and see, cover yourself. Make sure that they're all, make sure it's a complete picture. Yeah, exactly. Can't rely on one, Jen.
All right. Any other questions? And making sure I didn't miss any in the chat. I don't think I did, but if I did, let me know.
Let's see here.
Katie.
Thanks, Joseph. So I think earlier there was a question about best practices for alt text, and I don't know if we gave Marissa a chance to really dive into that. I think that's something people would really like to hear about it. So
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, I was trying to mute my screen reader, and last time I did it, it muted my audio. So I'm glad that my assistive tech worked this time. Yeah, so for alt text, as I mentioned before, this is where I'm able to kind of understand what the images are. And I actually dove into this for another organization on best practices. And really, you don't want to be too extensive with your description. That can get a little lengthy. And I also, from my niche of being in digital marketing, I always like to encourage organizations or brands to use this as a spot for keywords for SEO. So it's multi-purpose. It's not just for accessibility, but it also props you very well for web analytics. With that being said, when you're implementing alt text, it doesn't need to be implemented on design elements, like something that breaks up the page in sections. Like that does not need to have any sort of alt text. We're talking about images, because if there is no alt text when I'm scanning, all it is saying is image. So I'm left wondering what image was that? And it needs to describe just what that image is. Like, for example, if it were me using my white cane getting onto my local transit, you might want to describe a blonde woman using a white cane, wearing a light pink white blouse, is stepping onto the transit, the bus. So just painting that mental image for the user. But again, it's not in all circumstances where there's an image element, because we're not going to add alt text to a design element like a border or a page break.
Yeah, and just to Marissa, just going off of that, and I just want to speak to something that we run into often, and I think someone in the chat actually brought it up. It's that um, sometimes SEO can or alt text can be sort of hijacked for SEO. And so this is
Absolutely.
right. So this is, and I know you've seen this, it's, if we bring that into, sort of the real world, right? We're dealing with organizations and businesses that are trying to, they have many, um, there's many initiatives, right? And so sometimes it's not so much that we're hijacking alt text in order to increase SEO. It's more we're having a conversation with the business owners or the organization key holders, shareholders, to figure out, hey, we have these competing missions in our organization. Okay, we have alt text and we have SEO, and they're fighting for the same real estate. And so sometimes it's about letting people see where both can be used advantageously. So not hijacking alt text for SEO, but making alt text and SEO both work at the same time.
Well stated.
Right. It's easy to say, hey, just alt text is the only thing that matters, and we're gonna just focus on that. But the reality of the situation is that there's so many people with so many competing missions and goals that we do our best.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Julian, that's part of my niche is marrying those two elements is the digital marketing and the digital accessibility. So absolutely through your point, I've worked for companies that hijack the alt text to keyword stuff just so they rank better. But I think it's so important to have the conversations with these organizations that those two elements can be married together and be mutually beneficial. You can have a website that performs really well, and you're also helping the end user who may not be able to physically see your website.
Yep. We do have another question from Juniper. I think we have a couple more minutes here. So as a human-centered review is critical, and they mention both Axe, the Axe checker, and Common Look as two of the best checkers or proactive tools that they've used. I would echo that. The Axe checker is good. I use it for my own like automated pipelines. Everything we do is manual, but that doesn't mean that we can't use automation to our advantage. One thing I use it for is to check back on websites that we have remediated to see if there's any like regressions, fixes that we made that broke, right? That's the sort of thing that you want automation to help you look for because it's giving you an early warning sign to then follow up with a real human tester. So there's, Axe is good, Common Look can be good as well. But, it's just at the end of the day, it's not the end. You can't just stop at those tools. I think Marissa would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we spoke on our presentation, the pyramid of how the inspection goes, with the top tier being that human-led inspection, I think that's so incredibly important as someone who has inspected a web page that had been told that they went through an automated service and they were confident. I am running into so many barriers because they didn't have someone who actually uses the assistive tech run through it. And I always like to use this quote because I think oftentimes when we're dealing with the disability community, it's done in a way that doesn't include us. So nothing about us without us. And I very much stand true to that. And that's why I love doing inspection work.
And sorry if I don't know if the interpreter, I think we might have hit our cap on the interpreter. So I just want to make that aware for everyone.
Yeah, so that's probably what it is. They may have had to leave at the end of their time limit. So yeah, I guess with that, because we want to respect the time for the other interpreters and our captioner as well, that we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for the great presentation. Y'all were definitely a great panel. And thank you for the audience coming and supporting. Congratulations, we've celebrated another year, and Hopefully we'll catch everybody back next year. I do know there was a couple of times I saw in the chat questions about getting copies of slides and some of the phone numbers and links and stuff like that that was shared in the chat. We will definitely try to get all that documented, but the slides and a recording of today will be posted to the event website. Give us roughly about the rest of this week to be able to do that, because we go back and embed the video with captioning before we post it. So it will be there, but just give us some time. And again, thank y'all to everyone that was here today, and hopefully we'll catch you next year. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.